It is Boxing Day, 26th of December 1900. You are alone. The only sound you can hear as you pick your way slowly towards the gate is the wind biting at every inch of exposed skin. You burrow further into the collar of your coat. It's just over a week since the captain of the steamer Eilean first reported that something might be wrong at the lighthouse on Eilean Mòr. They had passed on their way to dock in Leith and had seen no light. You are the first soul to set foot upon the island since the Eilean sounded the alarm. Your relief ship, the Hesperus, was stuck in port due to that damned winter weather. There was no one there to greet you as you rowed your little boat up to the island's landing stage. None of the crates that the lighthouse keepers usually left out to be resupplied were there either. No flag flies in the howling wind. Before sending you ashore, the captain of the Hesperus had tried to signal the keepers using a flare which lit the slate-grey sky scarlet as it whirled high above the ruins of the chapel of St. Flannan. As the relief lighthouse keeper, it has been decided that it is your task to go ashore and investigate. From Be Quiet Media and The Big Light, this is Scottish History Out of Order, a podcast about history and where we made it. I'm Michael Wilson Park. The entrance gate leading up to the lighthouse, which sits at the highest point of the tiny island, is shut, as is the main door to the little structure. It creaks with the assurance of weight as you push it open. You call out into the darkness. There is no answer. A set of oilskins hangs limply on a peg by the door. You know there should be 3, which means you know that someone went out into a storm without them. The clock has unwound. The beds are unmade. You are no longer alone. 2 sailors from the Hesperus are helping you search the house and the island itself. The oil in the lamps which illuminated the night sky has been refilled, the filters cleaned, for another night of signalling. The only thing missing are the 3 men who tended it. James Ducat, Thomas Marshall and Donald MacArthur are nowhere to be found. They will never be found. The captain of the Hesperus telegrams the Northern Lighthouse Board. A dreadful accident has happened at the Flannan stop. The 3 keepers, Ducat, Marshall and the Occasional, have disappeared from the island stop. The clocks were stopped and other signs indicated that the accident must have happened about a week ago stop. Poor fellows. They must have been blown over the cliffs or drowned trying to secure a crane stop. You spend the next days on Eilean Mòr, trying desperately to find any clue about what happened to the 3 keepers. You find nothing, except storm damage on the west landing, where it seems that winds had managed to move giant boulders, bend the iron fencing at a horrifying angle, and even wrench the railway tracks from their concrete housings. Muirhead, the superintendent from the Northern Lighthouse Board, comes a few days later and conducts an investigation. A very thorough one, you're quite sure. And concludes that the wind was going in the wrong direction to have blown your colleagues away, and that the crane you believed they had been trying to secure was untouched. However, he does mention that the damage to the western landing was
difficult to believe unless actually seen.
His report mentions that same damage you saw. The railings, the railway tracks, the giant boulder. But he also found that
a lifebuoy fastened to the railings along this path to be used in case of emergency had disappeared, and I thought at first it had been removed for the purpose of being used, but it was evident that the force of the sea pouring through the railings had, even at this great height, 110 feet above sea level, torn the lifebuoy off the ropes.
Muirhead, a company man with hands like shovels, notes, unnecessarily you think, that MacArthur, the last man to leave the lighthouse in what was assumed to be a last-ditch attempt to help his colleagues, was in breach of Northern Lighthouse Board rules by leaving the light unattended.
From evidence which I was able to procure, I was satisfied that the men had been on duty up till dinner time on Saturday the 15th of December, that they had gone down to secure a box in which the mooring ropes, landing ropes, etc. were kept, and which was secured in a crevice in the rock about 110 feet above sea level, and that an extra large sea had rushed up the face of the rock, had gone above them, and coming down with immense force, had swept them completely away.
James Ducat was married with 4 children. Donald MacArthur had a wife and 2 bairns himself. He was only an occasional too. He was trained to tend the light, but he was actually a tailor to trade. And Tommy Marshall? He lived and breathed the sea. He'd even kept the light at Ailsa Craig up until a few years ago, when he joined the NLB. You knew them. These men who had become merely items in a report. Muirhead knew them too. There's a photograph of the 4 of them, rigidly posed against the lighthouse door, each sporting a moustache slightly larger than the last. It was pinned up on the board inside. The conclusion of his report is full of Victorian stoicism, but you can feel the mourning seep through.
I would desire to record my deep regret at such a disaster occurring to keepers in this service. I knew Ducat and Marshall intimately, and MacArthur the occasional well. They were selected on my recommendation for the lighting of such an important station as Flannan Islands, and as it is always my endeavour to secure the best men possible of the establishment of a station, as a success and contentment at a station depends largely on the keepers present at its installation. This of itself is an indication that the board has lost 2 of its most efficient keepers and a competent occasional. I was with the keepers for more than a month during the summer of 1899, when everyone worked hard to secure the early lighting of the station before winter, and, working along with them, I appreciated the manner in which they performed their work. I visited Flannan Islands when the relief was made so lately as 7th of December, and have the melancholy recollection that I was the last person to shake hands with them and bid them adieu.
The whole thing unsettles your nerves. But you wouldn't tell Muirhead, the superintendent, that. You're obliged to stay at the Flannan Isles Lighthouse, as they say they need someone who knows the light to tend it until permanent arrangements can be made. Eventually you leave the Flannan Isles, never to return, although you remain a lighthouse keeper. And for the rest of your days, anytime you tell anyone about the lighthouse, about Ducat and Marshall and MacArthur, they ask you about the madness that overcame them, the one that made them murder each other. Or they ask you about the sea serpents, or they ask you about the spies who spirited them away in the night. You tell them that they were your friends, that there was a storm, that they were washed away. And they say, but what about the uneaten meals on the table? And you reply with the same thing every time. There were no meals. All the cutlery and crockery had been put away neatly. They were your friends. There was a storm. They were washed away. You've been listening to Scottish History Out of Order. It was written and produced by me, Michael Wilson Park, and is a co-production of Be Quiet Media and The Big Light. Additional production and voices in this episode were by Brian McAlpine. The music for this episode of Scottish History Out of Order was by Mitch Bain. Thanks for listening. Look after each other. We'll see you next time.